that my little army of being was essentially merciless, that I had been my whole life striving for my own approval from a part of my brain that had no capacity for approval. The left hemisphere loves perfection. It doesn't want anything less than perfection.
Cue music. Places, everybody places. We're starting in 3, 2.
It's time for Life Interrupted Radio, a show dedicated to practical skills for your mind, body, and soul. We're hoping we'll go in one ear and stay there. Here's the host of the show, Sharon Saylor.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. The NIH estimates nearly 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder. To put that in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. You'll be as surprised as I was to find out what autoimmune entails. I brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted. So let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. I'm your host, Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com. And as always, it's my pleasure to be with you here on another Friday night to bring you just great guests that I find that share fantastic information on how to thrive regardless of your diagnosis. And just a quick little plug. I've been mentioning on the show about the Transcribe Tribe. We're still continuing to add more transcriptions, so be sure and go over to Life Interrupted Radio and look for Transcribe Tribe. Yeah, it's one of those annoying pop-up windows, but be sure and go over and look and sign up for Transcribe Tribe on Life Interrupted Radio. That way you'll get to see, we're 140 some episodes now, and we don't have all of them done. It's been quite an undertaking. If you don't see the one you want, just drop us an email there from the site, and we'll be sure and put that one right up to the top of the queue. But I think we have about 40% of them, maybe 50% of them done now. My staff is busily working on that, so be sure it's Life Interrupted Radio, and then look for the Transcribe Tribe button. And tonight I am so excited. One of our all-time favorite guests, we've had her on 3 or 4 times now, and she is just always so well received because she is just awesome. I guess that's the only word that comes to mind. Her name is Sarah Peyton. She's an international speaker and facilitator, and she has a passion for weaving together neuroscience knowledge and experiences of healing that unify people, with our brains and our bodies. So often during these experiences, we can just get sort of stuck in our body or stuck in our brain, or both get stuck. We'll talk to Sarah about that, because she takes the research from interpersonal neurobiology and she makes it available for us to understand in an understandable way. And she's also just a delightful, funny, and just a charming person. I always love having her here because you'll notice tonight we'll probably go down a couple rabbit holes, but she's always game for it because we'll talk about nonviolent communication. And so welcome, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much, Sharon. Happy to be here.
I forgot. After your new book. Show us Your Resonant
Self.
Self.
Yes, I have a new book. It's called Your Resonant Self. It's called Your Resonant Self, Guided Meditations and Exercises to Engage Your Brain's Capacity for Healing.
And I got to read an advanced copy, and I was just, yes. I was so excited. It's so wonderful that you're an author, and now you're getting your message out in such a bigger way. You're always so inspiring as the healing and hope out there that we can get better. So thank you for being on the show. Let's chat a little bit about what is the book about. I mean, the subtitle says it all, but why this book? I mean, you could have written hundreds of kinds of books. Why this book?
Well, this book in particular is a guided journey through the world of relational neuroscience. So it's a real look at how scientists are discovering the deep ways in which we affect one another, that we affect one another's brain, we affect one another's bodies, we affect one another at the level of the immune system.
Wow.
We change the way each other's cells are responding, depending on how we respond to each other and, of course, to ourselves.
Wow. I was reading a study, and maybe this is too far a leap, but tell me if this is kind of the same thing. I was reading a study recently about addiction, and they found that when people form deep connections, they have a better time of conquering their addiction. Is this kind of that similar connection that you're talking about?
It is. It's so related. It's kind of this funny secret to us here in North America. We're always surprised by the depth of the human need for a relationship.
That's true.
We're raised
as rugged individuals.
That's right. The lone hero. It's all of our mythology. When in actual fact, what our bodies and our hearts and our brains and the tiny cells of our immune system need to know, they all need to know that we are safe with one another.
Oh, yeah. I want you to bring up when you say that, safe, because I've shared it on the show with other people, and it's always been so powerful. You mentioned on one of your shows with me these two things that our brain is always asking, and that was, am I safe and do I matter? And
do I matter?
I thought that was so profound. I mean, I kind of, when you said, am I safe, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But when you said, do I matter? Wow.
Yeah. It's interesting because we often think about safety as being a purely physical state, that we know that we've got our doors locked, or that we know that we've got our security guards on call, or we know that we're walking beside somebody who's 3 feet taller than we are and looks like they're really big and strong. But in actual fact, part of human safety, interestingly enough, is having a sense that when we speak, our voice is going to matter.
I just love the way you say that. It sends chills up my back. Talk some more about what you find about this idea of needing to matter.
I often actually walk around thinking about this because I think it's really sort of sneakily radical. The idea that in order for us to truly relax and for our immune systems to really shift into their most effective state, we need to have a sense that when we open our mouths and express ourselves, that it's important to the people around us, that they're going to actually listen.
Wow. How rare is that today? I
know.
Wow. I mean, I know people in my world, you and other people in my world that would work, but I think we all make that a priority. In our community, I think we make that a priority. But boy, on a larger scope, that is radical. But it's always you who brings up these radical thoughts. I love that. Yes,
I've been thinking a lot about this, about how language and the words that we use and the way that we respond to the people that we're talking with, whether or not we actually catch what they're saying, or whether we kind of gloss over it, and that it makes such a difference, that it changes everything. I often I love thinking about the environment of the brain, because I love the neuroscience. And so inside the brain, there's all these hundreds of millions of little neurons that are the little cell building blocks of the brain. They're sort of like little trees, except for they're going every which way, and the roots of one tree talk to the branches of another tree instead of the branches talking and the roots talking. So there's a topsy-turvy thing in the environment of the brain. But at any rate, the way that the neurons communicate with each other is through their neurotransmitters, through their kind of tiny building blocks of electrical and chemical communication. And I think about us humans kind of as like neurons, and what we're sending to one another is sent with our words. The way we talk, the words we use travel through space from me to you, just the way in the brain the neurons are receiving these little signals also. So it's kind of like inside of our brain we make one human brain, and with the people that we're connected to, we kind of make group brains. And we make these group brains with our words.
Wow. That's fantastic. That that's also a little scary in a way.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of how contagious maybe negative words could be. I mean, instead of just going, ooh, that hurt, or that didn't sound good, it sounds like it could be more profound than that.
It is. It's so profound. As humans, we can listen to a stranger's voice, and we can tell within one sentence from the way that the person is using their voice and the intonation of their voice whether or not that person is speaking with contempt.
Wow.
And this is important because, and I may have mentioned this on the show before, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but contempt is the emotion that most affects other humans' immune systems. People who live in relationships with a partner who is contemptuous get more colds and flus and take a longer time for their wounds to heal. If they get a scratch or something, it takes longer to heal if they're in a relationship where there's contempt. Wow. Many of us, of course, were raised in families where contempt was used as the form of, kind of discipline and control. And something I think I'm almost certain I've learned since I was on this show last is that shame is the emotion that creates the most flow of cortisol of any emotion in the human body. So when people are bringing contempt, there's this double whammy. We're receiving the contempt, and then also there's a shame reaction that's creating this flow of cortisol. We're literally under attack. Our bodies are receiving the negative expressions of others literally as an attack. Wow. We do have that, that old nursery rhyme, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me, that we teach to children in the effort to try to give them a little bit of some kind of safety against other people's words. But we are profoundly moved and profoundly affected by it. We have a deep responsibility with our language that very few of us even know about.
Oh, I'm always mesmerized by you, Sarah. And repeat yourself as often as you want, because I'm always going, I may have heard it, but and now it's really sinking in. I don't know how many of you out there have ever gone to an event or something, and maybe you've repeatedly gone. I have several people, like Sarah's one of them, that I go to everything they offer. And sometimes I'll go up after and say, you never said that. And I go, well, I've been saying that for 5 years, Sharon. But I'm now ready to hear it. And I think that's important too.
Yes,
sometimes wherever I'm at isn't kind of ready to go, well, that fits into my understanding now. And that's what I love about what Sarah offers us so often is we have this chance about, we're doing the best we can where we are now. And next time Sarah comes to visit us, we're in a different place, just like she is.
That's right.
Oh, gosh,
that's right.
This is so powerful. Because it's like secret weapons. It's so powerful. It's
yes.
And you're right. I can think of how many. I still see it somewhat today in raising children, for sure. Wow. Okay, go ahead. I'm mesmerized.
Well, the book thinks about this and talks about this a lot. And in particular, in the book, I'm inviting us to think about how we speak to ourselves.
Good point.
Because we're using language with ourselves, right? We've talked about what it's like to be in a partnership if the partner has contempt. But what is it like to live inside ourselves when we have contempt for ourselves? What if we respond to all of the bad things that happen by saying, Sarah, you stupid idiot, how could you have done that? How could you have done that again? Why didn't you make a different choice? How could you have been so fill in the blank, lazy, stupid, insensitive, thoughtless, with such lack of foresight? Here, I haven't even used any curse words, and you're starting to hear how there can be this real constant sense of being under the knife of evaluation with ourselves all of the time.
Wow, that is so strong, Sarah, because you used your name, and I know it was an example, and I know it's example because I know and love you. But man, my stomach tightened up when I heard you say that about yourself. Yeah. That is surprising.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, we both know it was an example. That is surprising to me how much my stomach tightened when I heard you talk about yourself in those words. Wow. I can't imagine what it does internally. Yeah. Do we have to just sort of now do an erase because that was just an example? How do we...
Well, one of the things that I invite is sort of a surprise twist on this in the book and in the work that I do. I love this about this work, that you listen in a really different way to the critical voice. So you've got this critical voice talking, and so you start to listen. So here's this, Sarah, how could you have been so stupid? And then it's like we're learning to step into a different part of ourselves and to turn toward ourselves like a really good parent. And when I mean really good parent, I mean really resonant parent, and a parent who really understands every voice. And so we turn to ourselves and go, Sarah, are you so disappointed? Did you so want something different to happen? Are you really worried that it was a decision that you made that led to this disappointment or difficult event? Are you wanting to know that Sarah's going to survive in this world and that she's going to have all of the resources and strength that she needs to make it through? And then that little critical voice, sort of pouts.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yes, that is what I want for Sarah.
Oh, that's true. That's what was going on in my own mind, and we're using your name. That's fascinating. Oh my gosh, so when we get together, time flies. We need to take a quick commercial break, guys. We'll be right back, and Sarah's going to talk more to us about that resonant self and that parent and child relationship. I think that's so profound to understand how we can walk ourselves out of this. So, and folks, we'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
Life Interrupted Radio will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com to learn more.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
I'm Fidel Mshombo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America, and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. I'm your host, Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and we are just thrilled today to have Sarah Peyton back with us. As I mentioned before, she is an international speaker and facilitator and an expert in so many things, and understanding the neurobiology of how we are, how our brains talk to our bodies and how our brain talks to our brain, how others affect us. And she's got a fantastic new book called Your Resonant Self, Guided Meditation and Exercises to Engage the Brain's Capacity for Healing. And she's been just sharing with me things that have had my mouth agape here, being mesmerized. She's always sharing fantastic things. Sarah, before we had to take that quick commercial break, we were talking about how we can parent ourselves when we have these moments. And I think it was so fascinating when you were talking about when we turn that contempt inward, or I'll say on ourselves. Does that make sense? Is that how you were describing it, that we turn it on ourselves?
Yeah.
So guide us some more on, I think maybe a refresher, a reminder, because that was so powerful. I could see how many people don't, at this point, haven't gone, parent myself. Wow.
Yeah. Well, one of the things when we're listening to this voice, as we were right before the break, and we're listening kind of in a new way to our own self-criticism, to see what are those deep longings, what is it that our critical self really wants from us. Sometimes our critical self really wants us to survive, and sometimes our critical self doesn't even know that we exist. I had this very interesting moment, and in order to understand the moment clearly, let me give you a sense of the left and the right hemispheres. So everybody's got a left hemisphere and everybody's got a right hemisphere, and they work differently. They have a different neural structure. In the animal world, throughout the animal kingdom, the right hemisphere actually weighs a little more than the left hemisphere, because there's more neural matter in the right hemisphere running around and connecting everywhere and giving us a sense of the big picture, where the left hemisphere is a little like soldiers in an army. It doesn't have the same length of neurons that are running everywhere to give people a sense of a big picture. So your right hemisphere is really the part of us that's structured by relationship and by warm and resonant parenting, or warm and resonant parenting of ourselves. One of the sweet things about the kind of healing that we're talking about, Sharon, is that we're talking about supporting the parts of the brain that continue to develop and change and grow throughout our lifetime. So nobody is too old for this.
Fantastic.
It's not too late for anybody. We can all start to listen in this way. We're using our relational fibers, and the relational fibers just keep getting more and more complex and rich the more relationships we have, and the more we have a relationship with ourselves. So here we have this right hemisphere that, when we're treated very resonantly, has the capacity to kind of put its arms around us and hold us. And then we have this little army of the left hemisphere that's just marching away, getting things done. The left hemisphere's fuel is dopamine, the fuel of doing things and seeking and finishing tasks and getting those items on the to-do list done and answering those emails and making sure the kids' teeth are brushed, getting everybody to bed, making sure the dishwasher got started. I mean, it's just the whole thing, right? Our little army of being. When I understood that my little army of being, which was the place where I lived mostly.
Yeah, my hand goes up on that one too.
Yeah. That my little army of being was essentially merciless. That I had been my whole life striving for my own approval from a part of my brain that had no capacity for approval.
Wow.
The left hemisphere loves perfection. It doesn't want anything less than perfection. So if we're trying to get approval from our own self that wants perfection, that's always comparing, it's a fool's game.
Wow.
This was like, I was hit by lightning when I realized this. I was like, oh my God, I have spent my whole life trying to get my little army's approval. It's not an approval machine. It's a condemnation, criticism, and comparison machine.
Oh my gosh, so we've been running on high fuel on the wrong machine.
Yeah.
Or I won't say the wrong machine, just a machine that wasn't built for what we wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess you can't get ice cream out of a sausage maker, can you?
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense. I got it.
So if we're looking for warmth and resonance and solid relational connection from our army, we are barking up the wrong tree.
Okay, so we're barking up the wrong tree. I know, you know. What do we bark at instead?
Well, this is the interesting thing, because for those of us who have grown up in homes where our parents were also being run by their little armies, very sweet people, but run by their little armies, didn't really have the capacity to shift over into warmth and resonance, you can tell kind of how people's response is going to be when you tell them that you feel awful. Like, oh, I feel so bad. You know, something bad happened. I feel so bad. And you stop there and you listen to them. And if they start telling you how to fix it, that's their army talking. Oh, have you tried chicken soup? Oh, did you call the police? Oh, are you sure your neighbor can't come over and take care of the cat? All of these things are the army talking. So what is the voice of the right hemisphere? Where do we start to bark? You know?
Exactly, because I'm going, all of those
question.
were great responses.
Yeah.
What's wrong with those responses?
Yeah, exactly. The interesting way to begin to respond to these questions with ourselves and with others is kind of a warm curiosity about how it really is for the other person. So if you tell somebody that you're sick and they say, wow, I wonder if you're so exhausted that you just can't even lift a finger anymore. That is their right hemisphere talking. Those are words of relational connection. Words of relational connection include feelings and longings and dreams, memories. They also include poetry, like poetic visions, a sense of like, oh, as you're speaking to me, you were doing this, Sharon. When I was talking about giving you an example of my internal critical voice, and you said, oh, my stomach hurts. My stomach hurts when you said that. That's your right hemisphere speaking. That's relational connection. You're letting me know that our bodies are in relationship, that we're responding to one another. So other examples would be, you know, your child shares with you some kind of deep worry that they have, and you go, gosh, that makes my heart hurt. How are you doing? Very different from, well, have you tried calling the school counselor about this?
Oh, dear. Yeah, it does sound very different. Yeah, I can see which one I can just immediately tell you which one I would have wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going to work to respond from, because that makes so much more sense. Because like you, my learnings were to go to the left brain and solve it and fix it.
Yeah, that's what we grew up to believe love was. We believe, that's what we were offered. And it certainly came with a lot of love.
Yeah, it does. But sometimes, well, one of the things I was thinking about it, though, is sometimes it might solve the problem temporarily. Like maybe they did call the school counselor and it gets smoothed over, but it doesn't really make that deeper understanding or that deeper connection between people. So I guess it's sort of like spackle. Yeah.
And it doesn't strengthen their immune system.
Now that part fascinates me. It doesn't strengthen their immune system.
Yeah, it's kind of a neutral response. The problem-solving response. What really strengthens people's immune systems, strengthens their right hemispheres, strengthens their resilience in the face of future experiences of life's problems, is being met with relational connection.
Fascinating. I have a quick question, though. One thing that came up for me was we've had Dr. David Clark on before. I just love him. We've had him on a couple of times. And he's got 5 categories of trauma that play into, they don't cause autoimmune, but they certainly can help exacerbate autoimmune. And one of them is he always says, I think it's the 5th one is the one he says it about something, I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of good relationship, bad health. And he said he has noticed that sometimes people who have been able to sort of keep it together through all sorts of bad things, they get into a good supportive relationship and he's seen that where then they'll have a health moment, something will pop up in their health. And he was talking about the idea of possibly that's when you have the safety to sort of regain your health. He said your health has probably been bad the whole time, but you have this sort of health moment where everything sort of falls apart because you have the safety to have that moment. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it dovetails perfectly. Of course, if we're surviving kind of in fight or flight, then everything's kind of in a state of suspension. This will happen with soldiers when they're on the battlefield. They're kind of in a state of constant fight or flight. They don't get colds. And then they come home from the war and they're hit with tremendous colds because they're no longer on the battlefield anymore. It used to happen to me at school. I would make it all the way through the finals and then I would have terrible colds and flus because I could stop running at that point. And I think another thing that happens, this gets talked about in the recovery community a lot. Another thing that can happen is people will get into safe relationships and then they'll start to remember what it was really like and how bad it really was when they were little ones, which has a whole arc of experience of like reliving the trauma, getting help, moving through it, and then rebuilding into a new and much more resilient way of being, both physically and emotionally and mentally. We build resilience with our healing.
Wow. We have covered so much. I am in awe, and I keep forgetting my questions because each thing that I hear, I just am in more awe, so I keep forgetting my questions. We're going to take a quick commercial break so I can regroup for a second because I have 20 different rabbit holes I want to run down here with just in a little bit of time. Sarah's been sharing with us, so we'll be right back.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
What are all the things you witness online in a day? Cats playing piano, selfies on your feed, your friend's picture being turned into a nasty meme that's been shared 50 times, 51, 52. When someone's being bullied online, it's hard to know what to do. Now you can speak up with the witness emoji. It looks like an eye in a speech bubble, and it's in the symbol section near the clocks in your phone. You'll let the world know it isn't cool, and you'll let your friend know you care. Learn more at eyewitnessbullying.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. I'm your host, Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and today we're talking with Sarah Peyton. She is just an amazing woman, as you've already heard the insights that she's shared about the neurobiology and healing and how we can either hurt or enhance our immune system, not only by how we are thinking and being, but by those around us as well. And you may have heard that I am just mesmerized by this whole idea. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing all of this information. I want to make sure that we can get as much in here because I'm just, I'll say, lapping this up. It's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about some more. We've talked a little bit about healing ourselves, and then we got into by one of my rabbit holes, the question of being in relationships and how being in a good relationship we have the safety to heal. If we are the partner, I'll say the person or partners, however we want to describe that, that are making that good relationship or that safety. I guess that's the better word.
Mm-hmm.
How do we support the person's healing? What are some things that we can do to support that person through this process?
The more we move toward resonance and the less we're in that fixing mode, the quicker people move through their healing process. This is one of the other very interesting things about the left hemisphere. It will get a lot done, but it creates a static emotional frozenness where nothing moves. And part of the reason that this is true is because this piece of information and research is something that Ian McGilchrist quotes and synthesizes in his beautiful and huge book, The Master and His Emissary, the largest book written to date about the left and the right hemisphere. Ian McGilchrist writes that the way that the left hemisphere integrates new information is to blame. So anything bad that happens, if the left hemisphere can assign responsibility or blame, then it can make sense of the world again. So when something difficult happens, we want to blame. We want to know who is at fault, and could it possibly be that they could do something different the next time? So this is a part of that critical inner voice that we're in relationship with, because we'll blame ourselves, right, in order to explain something difficult that has happened. So here we are, self-blamers. We'll get frozen there. It's not a very flexible or fluid place, the assigning of responsibility. Once we decide somebody's at fault, then we stop. Humans are perfectly capable of holding a grudge for their entire lives. They're perfectly capable of staying with that story that when they were 5, their 8-year-old brother did this thing, and now
that you're 65,
that's the way it is.
Yeah, that you're
it's
65 and they're
never
68. That's still that way.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And that's not very supportive for our immune system. Part of the healing process is the movement that happens when we're met with resonance. So people's healing process gets stuck if there's no resonance in the system. This is an interesting distinction because we can have warmth without resonance. It's actually much easier in this world to find warmth than it is to find resonance. Because we can feel the warmth in those suggestions of strategy that people are bringing to us. Could you call your school counselor? Are you sure you've had enough to eat? You can hear the warmth that's alive and the love. You can feel the love. But without the understanding, there's less movement and it moves much more slowly. So the more that we can understand and integrate right hemisphere responses, the more people move, the more they readjust and realign their stories. And you touched on this very briefly in the beginning of our call, the idea of post-traumatic growth, that when something bad happens to us, we as humans have the possibility of finding the meaning within it. And that finding of meaning happens much more quickly if we're met with the right hemisphere. When we find the meaning, then there's a rebirth of hope, and there's a sense of owning our own lives and having agency that is tremendously supportive for the healing journey. Is this a helpful response to your question, Sharon?
It is, although I have a quick question I need a little deeper.
Sure.
That I want to point out that someone else finding the meaning is not helpful.
No.
Correct? You're saying that's the soldier going, well, maybe this is a hidden silver lining.
That's right.
It's blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So that's a soldier talking.
That's a soldier talking. Yes, and the meaning making arises spontaneously after the resonance. You hear people doing it. You know that they've had enough resonance when they go, oh, I understand why this happened. Oh, I see my part in this. Oh, I understand why Joe was so angry. You hear that just spontaneously arising once the connection is made.
Well, let's review what resonance is then, because we've gotten a lot of background. We had the explanation of resonance and hearing and listening in this specific way. Let's review that again and walk us through the process. Let's say first with ourselves. You had talked about this idea of parenting ourselves, and then we'll go as if we are someone who's just there, who's there to support.
Okay. Do you want me to use an example from my own brain, or would you like to provide something that you hear yourself saying to yourself?
Go ahead and use an example from your own brain.
Okay. See, most recently, I discovered that one of my family members had something really bad happen to them about 5 months ago that they've been dealing with on their own without telling me. I was just watching my own brain go to town. And the major thing that I was hearing from myself was, you could have done it differently. If only you had done it differently, you would have saved them from this experience. Why didn't you do it differently? And so if I stop to listen, part of the listening can be listening to the body, just as you were when you said, oh, my stomach hurts when I hear this. So when I hear myself saying this, Sarah, you could have done it differently. There's a kind of a cramping in my diaphragm and a collapsing. And there's, in this moment, the major thing I think is a mourning that life is irreversible. You know, there's and as I say that, I can feel like a little bit of letting go in this diaphragm area. It's like, I don't want to feel the grief of irreversibility. No, I don't want this to have happened. There's a protest inside of me. A protest, of course, that wants to find somebody to blame. If I could blame myself, then maybe I could do it better next time. Maybe is there some way I could change the very foundational roots of my being so that I was a different person, so that this wouldn't happen? And that gives me another deep breath, like really seeing how much I'm in protest, I'm in objection to this experience having happened. Yeah, so there's a lot more breath now, just kind of listening in this way for what are the deep longings, what am I pushing against, what is so hard to accept, are some of the questions that I can ask myself. What are my emotions is one way in. Like, there's probably hopelessness and shame. And then another way is you can do metaphor guesses for yourself. Sarah, is it like you planted a seed in the wrong place, and now you see that it's all rocky, that the soil is all rocky, and that you really wish that you could have done something different, and do you need a jackhammer so that you can do a transplant here? You know, something like that. Because metaphors and poetry are the language of the right hemisphere. So here we've touched on body sensations, we've touched on meaning making and the deep longings, we've touched on emotions, we've touched on metaphors, and another way that the right hemisphere makes an appearance is the impossible dream, which I was also touching on, which is the impossible dream is, Sarah, do you wish you could go back and do it differently? Do you long to have been a different person from the beginning? Like these are impossible dreams, but they let us touch resonant truths that lie within us, that let us embrace what is and move into the future instead of just staying stuck in self-reproach. Is this making any sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad a couple of times you mentioned you were breathing, because I found myself not breathing through a good portion of that, just in what I'll call in connection, being able to say, oh, that sounds familiar. That sounds familiar. So I'm glad you said breathe. Oh, my goodness. Okay. But I can see how deep that one could go with this and understanding, walking myself through it. I can see that. However, I think it would be harder with...
This is one of the reasons that I wrote the book. The book is packed with these kinds of questions for the reader. Because how can we learn to do it if nobody's doing it for us? And I was thinking this morning before we got on this conversation together, I was thinking about how important books were for me when I was a little girl and how much they were my community. And I thought, oh, this is what I've done. I've written a book to reach out, to bring resonance and resonant language to people so that they get to have a little portable community. Because one of the things that we need as we're building a larger and warmer and more connected sense of friends and relatives, we need like a little bit of like a little pot of oatmeal inside of ourselves that's just bubbling away, that's giving us the fuel to reach for something different. Because if we grew up in a house full of contempt, then when people are kind, we just doubt their authenticity. There's a little bit of a growing process that happens as we get used to the idea that we could be met in a really different way, and that it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's inauthentic if they are interested in us and if they consider us warmly.
Wow, that's fascinating. I can think of so many times where I've had those moments that I've met someone like that, and I'll say the previous me would have questioned, gone, what do they want?
Right. Right.
That might have come up. But with all of my learnings, I understand the new process. And the other one that came up for me was remembering years ago when this idea of meeting someone who was coming from that resonance place. And there was that moment, that light bulb moment in my life where all of a sudden, this feels wonderful. And then this other little voice said, now you have to step up. You can't play the old game. Now if this is really what you've been seeking, and here it is, now, okay, you're being called to step and play the bigger game too now. So
I love it that you've named that. Yeah.
Yeah, those were a couple of challenges that I remember during that process, is those two, sort of bumping into those two things. Yeah. Quick commercial break here, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I'm just so fascinated by this sort of blathering on, guys. We'll take a quick commercial break and we'll be back, and Sarah's going to tell us more about her book, how we can get her book, and also more about how you can work with Sarah, because it's just awesome. We'll be right back.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the Om Times Experts program. With Om Times Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Hey, Dr. Phil here. I help people solve difficult problems every day, but one problem has me stumped: childhood hunger. Nearly 16 million children in America struggle with it. Luckily, the Feeding America network of local food banks collects surplus food, giving hope to hungry children and their families. But they need your help. Join me in supporting Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. I'm your host, Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and I'm here with Sarah Peyton, and she is a certified trainer of nonviolent communication, and she has a brand new book out called Your Resonant Self, Guided Meditations and Exercises to Engage Your Brain's Capacity for Healing. Sarah, tell us about your book, how we can get your book, and
thank you, Sarah.
Just a couple of ways that maybe if you have any final parting thoughts you want to share with us.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. Well, here's the book again, Your Resonant Self. It's got a picture of a bird carrying a branch to build a nest. And we chose this image because we're building the neurons in our brain. We're building a nice nest for ourselves to live in inside of our own brains. And if nobody has ever been resonant with us, then we don't even know where to start. So this book has just tips, tools, questions, wonderings. It has guided meditations that are written inside the book, but you can also get me. There are free guided meditations on the book's website, yourresonantself.com. And on that website, you can sign up and you can get the free guided meditations that take you through the material of the book so that you can start to integrate it and start to kind of hear this kind of being with the self, which is so different from what many of us grew up with and so different from what many of us still carry. I remember when I started learning this material, I would read about how mindfulness meditation was so good for you. And I would try to do it, and it was hell. It was sheer, unmitigated torture and agony. And I would make it through 1.5 minutes, and I would be gasping from the self-laceration. It was like being locked in a room with Edward Scissorhands. My own brain had a brutal capacity for self-laceration. So I was so dismayed. How could guided meditations be, or how could mindfulness meditation be so difficult when it was supposed to be so good for you? And if I could never do it, how would I get the benefits? And then it was just at the beginning of starting to learn this interpersonal neurobiology material. And both Daniel Siegel and Bonnie Badenoch said, if you can't do mindfulness meditation, it means your brain has weapons that it is using against you. And it makes perfect sense that you can't do it. And then Bonnie Badenoch, who is the person who wrote the foreword and a marvelous therapist and writer who wrote the book Being a Brainwise Therapist, she was teaching, and she started teaching the first meditation that's in this book, which is a meditation of just paying attention to your attention. Where does your attention go if you invite it to come to your breath? And then being so gentle and warm with it, no matter what it does. Like all of a sudden, you aren't wrong for not being able to meditate anymore. All of a sudden, instead, it makes perfect sense. So going inside a brain that makes perfect sense is a very different experience than going into a brain that's got weapons and being undefended. So we really are changeable by warmth. Warmth and resonance change us. They change our very brain structure. And of course, for this audience, we change our immune systems. The more we bring warmth and resonance to ourselves, the lower our cortisol is, the more rest we get, the more our brain is neuroplastic, the easier time we have with all of those effects of autoimmune diseases that include, difficult experiences with memory, trying to track, trying to make the world make sense. Everything becomes so much easier if we are not beating ourselves up at every step.
Wow. So I'll pause there and just kind of check in with you, Sharon.
Well, Sarah, we're out of time. I'm just going to cry here. We're going to have you back because every time you're on, I just learn so much about the entire process of healing that we don't get anyplace else. And to me, when you and I started working together and talking about this whole idea and some of my other work with Dr. Clark and other people around this whole concept, it was things started to fall in place. That's all I can say. It was like, I get it now. Oh, and so I want everyone to get her book. It's a fantastic book. And we'll have Sarah back because we've just gotten a master course in understanding ourselves here. So we'll integrate this for a while, Sarah, and we'll have you back.
Okay.
Much
YourResonantSelf.com is the website. YourResonantSelf.com.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we'll have that up on Life Interrupted Radio, everybody. And thank you so much, Sarah. This is just fantastic. Everyone, have a great weekend, whatever your adventures. And as always, enjoy.
The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only. What you hear, read, and see on Life Interrupted Radio is based on experience only. The information presented here should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on Life Interrupted Radio. You've been listening to Life Interrupted Radio. To learn more, listen to other shows, and gain free resources that can help empower your life, be sure to stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com. This episode is brought to you by mindfulnessinactionbook.com. To get your free 4-minute guided meditation to relax, refresh, and renew in just 4 minutes, and who doesn't have 4 minutes? Stop by mindfulnessinactionbook.com now. This guided meditation is in handy MP3 format, so you can use it anywhere, anytime. Download it now at mindfulnessinactionbook.com.
Do you want to be a better leader? Have better relationships? Become more self-aware? Be a better communicator? Hi, I'm Sharon Saylor, best-selling author, professional speaker, and executive coach. And my life passion is empowering professionals to be the best that they can be. After years of working with professionals, I've discovered the 7 things nobody is telling you that can cost you your clients, sales, and even your career. And I want to give it to you free. You've heard my show, you know my passion, and maybe we'll be working together sooner rather than later. So go grab this ebook now to find out the 7 things that's costing you big time over at SharonSaylor.com/radio gift.